In this video, we're going to convert our project into using Sass. So Sass is very popular, so it's a good idea to learn it, or at least to have used it at least once. And it's generally helpful because it gives us some features that CSS itself doesn't have or doesn't have yet. So let's go to our code. So far we've been using plain CSS, right? The extension of this file is .css. But this is a normal CSS file. But now we're going to create a new file and we're going to continue writing our styles in the new file. And I'm going to call this file main.scss. Right, so this extension is SCSS, which stands for Sassy CSS, which is one of those two syntaxes that Sass offers. Right, so the other syntax that Sass offers is simply Sass, right, which is also the name of the preprocessor Sass itself. But people tend to use this syntax more because it's very similar to CSS, to plain CSS. Everything that is valid CSS, right? So everything in here will also be valid in here. But in this file, we can actually use some other features as well that will benefit us in some way. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to copy everything here from our plain CSS file. Right, so I've copied everything here. And then I'm going to paste it in this new file. And I'm going to save that. And make sure you copy and paste everything. And then after you've done that, we can actually remove this style.css file. Right, so now we are left with our HTML file and our Sass file here. And if you try using this, it won't work because our index.html file, right, this is the first file that our browser is going to receive. Well, this is still linking to that style.css file that we just removed. So this is not going to work. And by the way, the browser will not understand this file, right? So it doesn't understand files with the Sassy CSS extension. It doesn't understand Sass. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to compile this into regular CSS and then link to that regular CSS before it will work. Okay, now before we do that, let's actually just see what Sass has to offer us. Why are we using this right now? What's the benefit to us? So there's 2 or 3 main benefits, and then there are some smaller ones as well. So let's actually look at those. So the first benefit here is that we can nest our styles. So let's see what's a good example here. Yeah, so what we can do here, for example, we have this search block, right? And then we have these elements on the search block, right? So let's actually copy these. Let's copy all the elements on the search block. And then I'm going to paste that within this search declaration block. So we can put these in here, right? So it's a little bit more compact already. But the main benefit of doing this is that we can now also replace this dot search with an ampersand. Because the ampersand in Sass is the parent selector. So at this point, this ampersand is the parent selector, which is dot search. Right, so this ampersand, when we compile this into regular CSS, this ampersand will be replaced with dot search, and then it will be underscore underscore input. Right, you can also see that if you hover this, it will actually show you what the class will be or the selector will be. Right, so what we can do here is the same. Right, so we don't have to write dot search, blah blah blah. It's just ampersand. Right, so the ampersand here is dot search. That's the parent selector here. Right, so all of these dot searches, we can just replace that with the ampersand. Right, so that's already quite a difference. But now we can take it even further because as you can see here, we have underscore underscore input, right, which we actually also have here. So we can take these two, which start with underscore underscore input, and we can actually place that in here. And then replace this underscore underscore input, including the ampersand here, with just ampersand. Because the ampersand is the parent selector. So the parent selector here, right, this will be replaced with .search underscore underscore input, right? That's the parent selector here. And then it gets this tagged onto it. So the total selector will be .search underscore underscore input colon focus, right? And the same goes for here, right? So this is much more compact. And we can do the same with this submit focus state. So let's just copy this and paste that in here. And we can just replace this with an ampersand, right? This will be .search, right? This ampersand here will be replaced with .search underscore underscore submit. And so the total selector will be .search underscore underscore submit colon focus, right? So that's for the search. Let's do the same with the nav here. So I'm going to copy all of these nav elements, or the elements on the nav block. And I'm going to copy and paste that into the nav declaration block. And then we can just replace the .nav with the ampersand. Here as well. All right, because the ampersand here is .nav, right? It's the parent selector. So this entire selector here will become .nav underscore underscore list, right? So it's still the same selector. We can now just write it in a much more compact fashion thanks to Sass, right? But we can take it even further here, because here we have underscore underscore link, right? So we can also copy this and replace this with just an ampersand, because the ampersand here is going to be .nav underscore underscore link, and then it gets colon hover, right? That's the same as what we had before, but now we can just write it in a much more compact way. All right, let's see if we can replace anything else here. Yeah, we can also do it with this page here, right? Because this dot page, well, that will just be an ampersand in here. So if we just copy this in here, and so what we can do here is just replace the dot page with an ampersand, because dot page is the parent selector here. All right, so that's the first main feature of Sass that's really helpful, because now we don't have to write those long class names anymore. So BEM and Sass, they're two separate things, right? Developed independently from each other, so they're not connected in any way, but they tend to work together very elegantly, thanks to this nesting feature with the ampersand. All right, so another important feature is that we can use variables in Sass. So we're going to declare some variables up here. And actually, another feature is actually that we don't have to use / asterisk anymore to write a comment. We just have to write 2 // and that will be a comment in Sass. So here we can say variables. Okay, so what are variables and why do we want to use them? So we've used some colors here repeatedly, if you remember that. For example, here we have this EEF3F4 color, but we use that in other places as well. And when you have a big project, you're gonna use, well, similar colors all over the place for consistency, right? And it is a little bit cumbersome to keep remembering this hex code. So a better thing to do is simply put this hex code, the actual color, in a variable and just use the variable name wherever you want that color. So I'm gonna declare a variable here. You do that with the $, and we will say this is color gray light. And here I'm gonna paste that color. Right, so now we can use this color by using the name of the variable. So if I copy this color gray light name and go back to that color here in the search block, right? So we've used this color here, the hex code, but now I can simply use this name of the variable instead. And if we scroll down, we should see the other instance of this color. Let's see. Yeah, so we also used it here for the nav link. So we can replace that with the variable name, right? We don't have to remember that hex code anymore. We can just declare it at the top of our file, which is handy as well because we can find all of the variables in one place, right? So it's a nice overview to have. And also, if we want to change this color, we only have to change it in one place, right? Because the variable name will stay the same. We can just change the color in one place. So we don't have to change that hex code color in so many different instances. Okay, let's also do that with the other colors. So we're actually just going to copy this A9, B4, B7 color. And that's going to be our color gray medium. Right, so usually your projects are going to have quite a few gray colors. And you also want to have some consistency. So if you start using variables, it also basically forces you to be consistent. So now we can use this variable name, color gray medium. Let's see where we had that color. It started with A9. So here in the search input for the placeholder, we can change that here with color gray medium, and also here in the submit. And let's see. Yeah, also here for the nav icon, this color here. All right, that's the medium color. Now you can guess what the other one is going to be. It's going to be the dark color. So it's going to be this one. Right, so you can copy that from the submit selector for the search. And this is going to be color gray dark. Okay, so just copy this variable name. And let's replace this as well. So here the search input. And also for the submit in the focus state. And I believe that was it. Yeah. All right, so now we have changed our gray colors into variables. Right, so now we can also easily see what are all the gray colors that we're using in our project because it's all presented here in a nice overview, right? So it has many advantages. And it's not just for colors, by the way. So you can also use this for different font sizes that you have in your project. And some people even use a rule of thumb that whenever you use a value at least twice, you should put it in a variable, right? So what we're also going to do is create a variable for that transition that we're going to have all over the place. So I'm going to create a new variable called TS. And the transition that we want to have for our project most of the time, or maybe even all of the time, is going to be all 0.2 seconds, right? So we can also store this in a variable. And now we can copy this variable name and we can replace that down below here. Let's see if we can find those. Yeah, so here for the search input, we use this transition, right? We don't have to write all 0.2 seconds anymore. We can just use this variable name, right? So we don't have to keep remembering what our transitions are. We can just put it in a variable. And then if we just force ourselves to use the variables, we will be consistent as well. All right, so here in the nav link, we also have a transition. And I believe that was it. Let's double check. Oh yeah, so here in the search submit, we also have a transition. And yeah, that was it. All right, so now we also have that in a variable. And now, of course, the benefit of doing it this way is that if we ever want to change this, we only have to change it here, right? I can change this into 0.4 seconds. And now automatically all of the other transitions will take this instead of the 0.2 seconds, right? So I only have to change it from one place. All right, so variables are also really helpful. Now let's also change our comments into using this because this is much easier to write. So I'm going to change all of the comments here in just 2 forward slashes. So here as well. And here base styles. And here styles. And that was it. Okay. So now we also have an easier way of writing comments. And there are a couple of other small features like that as well, which we will run into as we build the project. Right, so you can see it's quite similar to plain CSS, and everything that is valid CSS will also work in here. But we do have to compile this into a regular CSS file before we actually can use it, right? Because now this is linking to a style.css file, which we don't have. And we cannot simply change this into main.scss because the browser doesn't understand Sass files. So we do have to compile this into a regular CSS file. So let's do that now. And to compile this, we actually need to use Node.js. Okay, so we need to use Node.js because we need to execute some JavaScript that will take that Sass file and output a plain CSS file. And so you need a so-called JavaScript runtime. You don't really have to understand the details of Node.js, but Node.js, well, it's very common these days in front-end development, so sooner or later you're gonna have to start using it. So if you haven't installed it already, this would be a good time to install Node.js. It's pretty easy, so you just click on this. Yeah, so you can just walk through the setup wizard here. You should read this, of course. And yeah, so here it shows you what it's downloading. So it's downloading Node.js itself, but then it also downloads this NPM-package manager. So like I said, we need to run some JavaScript code that can take a Sass file and output a plain CSS file. And we're not going to write that JavaScript code ourselves. We're actually going to use that code that someone else already wrote for us. We're going to download that code and then run that. And the way something like that is commonly done is with packages. So we're downloading a package that can take a Sass file and output a CSS file. And the most popular so-called package manager is NPM. So we can download that package from NPM, and we can even download other packages for other use cases, as we'll see. And NPM helps us manage all of those packages. So we can download the packages from NPM, and NPM itself will also manage it for us. So we need this. And the other tools are not important here, but don't change anything here. All right, so we don't need to tick this. All right, so then you just install it. Okay, so just do that and pause the video. And when it is complete, you can continue the video. All right, if you succeeded in downloading Node.js, or maybe you already installed Node.js before, now we need to open a terminal. So you can click on terminal and click on new terminal. And when you do that, you will see something like this. Now for me, this is going to be the command prompt, but you may see something like Windows PowerShell, or if you're on Mac, you will see something like Bash. They all refer to the same thing, which is that we can write commands in here. Now usually we use our mouse to click and point around our graphical user interface in order to interact with our computer. But we can also write commands to interact with our computer. Right, so this is also called a command line interface. We can write commands to instruct our computer to do certain things. So what we can write here, for example, is Node-B. And this will show us the version of Node that we have installed. So you should see a version. If you don't see something like this, it doesn't have to be the same version. In fact, most of you are actually going to have a different version simply because you're watching this video at a later time. But you should see a version. If you get an error or if you don't see a version, then you probably don't have Node.js properly installed. Or maybe you need to restart Visual Studio Code and try it again, right? So you should see something here. Otherwise, your installation of Node.js didn't go properly, or you need to restart Visual Studio Code. Okay, now assuming that you have a version here, which again doesn't have to be the same version, now we need to initialize our project here for the package manager. So we're going to say npm init. This is going to initialize our project here as an NPM project. So you can press enter and it's going to ask you a couple of questions. But this is not really important here. This is just some metadata about our project. So you can just press enter here all the way through. So if you press enter all the way through, you get a new file actually called package.json. And this contains some metadata about our project here. So we can see the name and the version and even some scripts. And it will also show us eventually what our project depends on, because we're going to use some packages. And so this project is going to depend on packages. Let's talk about those packages, because we need to install a package that can take a Sass file and output a normal, regular, plain CSS file. So NPM has a website, npm-js.com, and here we can search for the packages that we need. So we need a package that is actually also called Sass. So you can check out the information about this package here, but basically this package will take a Sass file and output a CSS file. So you can read all about that here. It's not really important here, but you can see it's very popular, right? It's downloaded millions of times every week. Okay, so we want to install this package. So we need to go to our command line here again, and we need to write npm install Sass. Right, that's the name of the package. And whether you're using the commands prompt or PowerShell or Bash, we have the same commands. So that doesn't make a change. That doesn't make a difference here. Right, so just write npm install Sass and press enter. And when you do that, a couple of things happen. Well, first our package.json gets changed, right? So now we have another entry here called dependencies. So this means our project depends on a couple of packages. In this case, it's just one package here called Sass, which is this version, right? So we get a version number here. And then we also get another file called package log. So this will basically keep track of the versions of our packages. And then we also get a folder here called Node modules. And this is actually where the code of our package is stored. So when you open this up, you will actually see a lot of packages here. These are all packages, which is weird because we only installed one package, right? So how can we have all of these packages? Well, if you look at Sass here, this is the package that we installed. And this package also has its own package.json file, right? So if we open this one, well, there's a lot of information here, which is not really interesting to us. But what we can see here is the following, right? So package.json of Sass actually shows us that it has some dependencies of itself as well. So the Sass package depends on the Chocodar package, right? And if we look at our node modules here, you can see NPM actually also installed that for us, right? Because the Sass package can only be used if it has that dependency available, right? Right, so our package manager automatically installs that for us as well. This Chocodar package, well, this actually also has a package.json file. All of these packages have a package.json file. And this Chocodar, let's see, this Chocodar actually has a lot of dependencies, right? So this Chocodar package can only work if it also has these packages. So NPM automatically installs these for us as well. So all of these packages will work, right? So that is one of the benefits of the NPM package manager. Now I'm going to close everything here. This is not really important for the course here, by the way, but maybe you were wondering about this. So I can close everything. If you see something like open editors, you can click on this icon, it will close everything. And then also you can click on this one and it will collapse all the folders. Right, so now it's clean again. Okay, so we installed our Sass package and now we want to use it. So we go to our package.json, and the way that we use it in this case is with a script. So I'm going to remove this test script because we don't need this. And now we can write the script that's going to take a Sass file and output a CSS file. So I'm going to write a new script. I'm going to call that script compile. And it's going to be colon and then two quotes again. So this script is going to be Sass. We need to use the Sass package, and it needs to take the Sass file, so main.scss, and it needs to compile this into a new file called style.css. All right, so this is our script, and this is the name of our script. So now make sure you save this, otherwise it's not going to work. So make sure you save it. And now let's go to our command line interface again, and let's try to run this script. So we can do that with npm run, and then the name of the script, which is compile. And if you press enter, well, you should see that we now have two new files. And one of those is actually the style.css file that we want. So if we open that up, you can see that this now has been compiled into regular CSS, right? So for example, we don't have the variables here at the top anymore, right? In our Sass file, we have variables at the top, but those, of course, they get replaced by the actual colors, right? Where we use them. This is just a Sass feature, right? So this is not what we have in regular CSS, in the compiled version. Right, so if we look at those colors now, let's see if we can find some of those. Right, so here for the search input, we have the actual hex code here again. Right, so Sass does that for us. And also the dark color here as well. Right, so we don't see those variables anymore. They have been replaced by their hex code value. And also we don't see the nesting anymore. Right, so we had search and then we used that ampersand underscore input. Right, let's see if I can find that here. Right, so search and then ampersand underscore input. This is much easier for us to write, much more compact. It looks much cleaner, but it gets compiled into this. Right, so the browser will understand that. The browser does not understand this, but it will understand this. And also the comments actually are gone. So these comments actually do not survive compilation, but that doesn't really matter here. This will work now because our HTML file is linking to a file called style.css, which is going to be this one. Right? And the browser will understand this. So if we go back to our project now, you should see that our project is working again. Right? Even though we have written our styles from the Sass file and we just compiled it. Right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to continue writing from this Sass file, and then we're just going to compile it. Now we don't want to get this css.map file. This is actually a so-called source map. So this type of file will actually help us solve some, for example, bugs. Because maybe we see a bug in our project, and if we try to inspect this now, that's going to be from the style.css file. But of course, we're writing our styles now from the Sass file. So it will actually help us map some of those problems from the regular CSS file into the Sass file. But it's not really necessary here. It's not really important. So we don't want to get this source map whenever we compile our Sass file. So we can also add some options here. So I'm going to write -- no source map. Okay, make sure you save that. And let's remove this source map file. And now let's try to run this again. So I'm going to say npm run compile. Okay, so now we don't get that source map. We now have an updated compilation. We actually didn't change anything, but if we did change something, it would just simply be updated here. The old file would get destroyed and we would get a new file. Okay, now there's one problem right now, which is that whenever we make a change in our Sass, for example, maybe the app should not be 1240 pixels, but let's say 1540 pixels. Right? If I save this now I have to run this script again to compile this. Right? So now I have to say npm run compile. Right? And now this will be the updated file, because now if I go back, yeah, it's much wider. But of course, this is a major hassle that whenever we want to see if an update succeeded, we have to compile it manually. But there's actually another option that we can add here, which is the following. I'm actually going to do that before the source map option. So we can write -- watch. And this will actually watch our Sass file for any changes. And whenever there is a change, it will automatically compile the Sass file into that CSS file. Right, so now if I run that script again, npm run compile, make sure you save it, by the way, the package.json file. So if you have saved that and now run the script again, what you'll see is actually that this caret thingy, well, it doesn't complete anymore. It stays here, indicating that this is an ongoing process. And it also says here, Sass is watching for changes. Right, so now if I make a change, let's change this to 1240 pixels, what it should be. If I now save this file, you can see it says here compiled main.scss to style.css. Right, and if I go back to our project now, it's the normal size again. Right, I don't have to manually run that command again. And also if I change the height into something very small, 530, if I save it again, it's automatically compiled. Right, so now it's very small. If I want to undo this again, I just change it back and save the file again. Right, so all of this is working now. I'm gonna close everything here again. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna continue writing our styles now from the Sass file, right? And whenever we save this file, it will automatically be compiled into this file, right? A new style.css file, which is what our HTML actually uses, right? And also, it will also automatically be updated by that live server, right? So now we have a pretty solid setup. And what we can also do, since this terminal is taking up a lot of space, you can simply drag this down here until it removes itself, and it will still run in the background, right? So it's still running now, we just don't see it. I can open it without creating a new terminal, but if I click on new terminal, I actually get a second terminal. So you can have multiple terminals open. So I don't want a second terminal. I just did this so I could see the terminal again. So I'm gonna close the second terminal, and now we see that initial terminal again. Right, so that's how all of this works. It may be a little bit intimidating with the terminal, but honestly, we don't need to do advanced stuff with this. It's just simple things that you're gonna have to do as a front-end developer. So I'm gonna remove this from our view again. And now we can continue our project.